Let's wait and test for them.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Coronado Library. So tonight we're celebrating the San Diego Tijuana World Design Capital with a talk that's going to cover future-looking design based on our border culture. So our speaker is an architect and credential planner who's investigated the urban and cultural features of the US-Mexico border region, specifically between San Diego and Tijuana. He's co-author of the book Here is Tijuana, and he's also the co-editor of the book A Temporary Paradise, a look at the San Diego region's special landscape. So please welcome Rene Ferraz. Can you hear me okay? Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks a lot for the invitation. Yeah, I just want to say I did co-edit Temporary Paradise. Actually, it was a re-edition, and it was actually an original book that was written by Kevin Lynch, Kevin Lynch for San Diego in 1974. So we and other colleagues and I did the re-edition in 20. It's just one of the so thanks for coming. I guess what I can say about myself, I'm not just an architect, but I consider myself a kind of multidisciplinary thinker and creator. My work spans, I've been in this discipline now for almost 30 years. My work spans what we call speculative design, and I'll let you know a little bit more about that. But I also do cultural critique and technological exploration as it pertains to architecture and urbanism. I like architecture. I engage architecture as a medium for storytelling, envisioning alternative futures, as you'll see, blending theory here, a little bit of architectural theory, blending art and technology. So I try to think about this discipline beyond kind of the traditional boundaries, and I try to incorporate elements of, also because of where I am at the border, social activism, environmental responsibility, community engagement, et cetera, et cetera. So, and that's through my teaching, because I am a professor at the University of Oklahoma, which I'll be living to Oklahoma to 140 degrees this weekend. So I'm going to miss the weather. So I teach there, I do research, I also teach students how to design buildings, so, but also teach them also that they can have a creative practice, that not all architects are just going to go to an architecture office and do that, but they can also do many, many wonderful things, many creative wonderful things, and innovative things. So that's a little bit about it. So I'm going to start. What is, well, tonight I will illustrate how architects and designers utilize speculative design to construct and deconstruct the cultural narratives that define physical and metaphorical borders. This exploration for me sheds light on the intersection of architecture, culture, identity in one of the world's most significant border regions where we are right now, the US-Mexico border. So what is speculative design? This is a working definition, so this is kind of my definition that I've been, and as you know, all these definitions are part of, or ideas that also come from other people, other books, other researchers and creatives that have also been working on something like this. But this is, I think this is where I'm at in the definition right now. Speculative design is a critical imaginative practice that explores alternative futures, narratives, and including dystopian possibilities. So not only is speculative design in a way to look at our, let's say, our good futures, but also it can make us think what can go wrong and how we can actually do something about it by trying to understand the factors that made or can make our futures go a different direction. So this practice challenges conventional boundaries, encourages reflection, provokes dialogue by merging fiction, cultural phenomena, and technology. You'll see there will be a lot of science fiction that I also will talk about, and anticipates future scenarios and reimagines the present. And that's, I think, one of the speculative design is not just about futurity, it's not just about the future, but it's about rethinking our present. I mean, how could our present would have been different if A or B wouldn't happen? Offering innovative perspectives on societal, environmental, and architectural issues. So that is kind of what speculative design is in a broad sense. So let's start. I like to start with these two images usually when I speak because they illustrate contrasting realities of the border region. The first reality is the stark one, resulting from the aftermath of the US-Mexico War that led to this binary mode of inhabiting the border. So I'm talking about the absolute map there of what Mexico looked like before 1848, before the Mexican-American War. So half of the territory of Mexico was lost in that war, and therefore now we have our border as we see it today, and the creation of these cities, of course, San Diego and Tijuana. The other part of this, part of these images, and I think it's the one on the right that speaks more of this, is the border is a spectrum where political ideologies and visual expressions converge and intermingle. So we see it in the news, we see it in political discourse, and we see it in the work of art of many border artists. That image there is a piece that was designed or made, illustrated by Melissa Arriola, who is a Tijuana artist. And so I think these two images play an interesting role of kind of the spectacle of the mediation of how the border is mediated, right? How these ideas are created about the border as we move on through time. So that's why I wanted to start with these two. But let's start with the view. This is the original plan of the city of Tijuana from 1889. It was published in 1889, so it's a year after the Hotel del Coronado was actually opened. So, and this was designed by an engineer called Ricardo Orozco. You know, Orozco was an engineer. He was also a land surveyor, and he developed this this plan for the city of Tijuana. So when we look at this plan is that when we look at this plan, we see that Tijuana was an idea. It plays far from the history of colonial rule and planning. Tijuana was closer to the 19th century Beaux-Arts principles. So what do I mean? Orozco imagined a future cityscape that would support society and economic aspiration. So the plan includes a grid layout with intersecting diagonals, avenues, reminiscent of the Len Font plan for Washington, D.C., or Haussmann's renovation of Paris, right? What does it lack? The plan lacks a clear center plaza or square, a hallmark of Spanish colonial planning. So that many traditional Mexican cities have. So instead, it focuses on the network of streets, avenues, without a dominant central public space. So interesting that this is where Tijuana starts to reinvent itself as something else other than kind of the traditional Mexican city. Right? It is an ideal plan because it appears to be superimposed on the landscape without any regard to natural topography. So it's floating up in the air. It's very abstract. right? And I think this plan represents the first form of speculative design in Tijuana. But it is very speculative. It has nothing to do with wars or colonialism. It's just an idea. And you can see here that it just was an idea because once the plan hit the topography, well, very little of that plan is known today. And of course, in 1889, the economy of the city, well, there wasn't really an economy yet in the city, so you could have developed all of those lots in the way that it would become, a city like once in the United States. And the topography did not allow for the continuation of the diagonals, et cetera, et cetera. So at the end, the realities have made truncated this idea of, let's say, universal Beaux-Arts, French Revolution sort of ideas. This was important. Why did Orozco think like that? Because he was educated in Mexico City, where all these ideas were really popular. So something happened between the 1889 and 1915. There was a kind of historical reimagining of the place because there really wasn't anything here at all. The Spanish did not leave much. There was a few missions, as you know, but there weren't big cities or here. So it was a blank slate, a tabula rasa, right? So there was a reimagining of this place. The image of the city, in this case, Tijuana and San Diego, reflected the architectural style of an alternative reality, a fabricated place that catered to American tourists, and that was Tijuana, offering them a romanticized vision of Spanish history and culture that in many ways never truly existed in that form. A kind of fictional landscape, blending elements of Spanish colonial aesthetics and local Mexican culture to create an illusion of exoticism, being exotic. I'm sorry for my pronunciation. And an allure designed to appeal to foreign visitors seeking a sense of adventure and otherness. The professor from the State, Paul Vanderbilt, wrote this great book called Second Playground, and it's a novel. It's a historical novel that talks about this time of Tijuana when the Agua Caliente Casino was a very important place for people from San Diego and Los Angeles to come down and actually be seen. So the whole Hollywood crowd would be down there. So Tijuana was kind of this place where they could come down and in a way enjoy themselves. And a lot of things happened there that were really interested, not only entertainment, but also bootlegging and all these kinds of things. And that's a little bit how Tijuana starts to get its sort of Sin City name. While in San Diego, you had another version of the California, not bungalow, but kind of the California Spanish style that also wasn't here, but it was sort of to boost sort of land values and to boost so that people from the east would come and actually settle here in California. So there was two very different ideas across the border of these landscapes. And that's something, if there's a critique I have about world design capital, is that I think we need to think about our differences as a strong element of our relationship rather than our similarities. So Balboa Park was also designed aimed to evoke the historical and romanticized images of Spain, colonial architecture, right? There was a little bit before, of course, when the casino in Agua Caliente, which was designed in 1928, had a Spanish colonial motif mixed with Art Deco interiors and details. And all this, of course, was cemented. I mean, this was designed by an 18-year-old architect called Wayne McAllister. So Wayne McAllister and his wife were hired by California businessmen of that time who came from San Francisco and they wanted to put this casino up in Tijuana. And they saw in their future this amazing Spanish style with lush details and Art Deco interiors. And they asked this 18-year-old draftsman to actually build it and design it. And so Wayne McAllister was one responsible for the architecture. So again, it's kind of this speculative design again, if you may, right? That it's just coming, the cities that are being built by an idea. So that's when the economy of the city of Tijuana basically took off. This is a photograph of Sheila Graham and F. Fitzgerald in Tijuana. And there's other pictures here, signage and scenes at the border that reflect the allure and mystique that Tijuana projected during Prohibition. The city became a fantasy playground for Americans offering an escape from the restrictions of US law, and this ties into the idea of Tijuana as an alternative reality. So the border itself became part of a spectacle, like I said, in a site where cultural, legal, and economic differences were both blurred and highlighted. The aspect can be tied to the concept of border spectacle, where the border is not just a physical divide, but also a site of cultural performance and negotiation. Here you had Americans coming to, well, basically entertain themselves, but you also have the US federal government trying to keep them from coming. So there's a mix here of this negotiation of desires and law, Puritan law, etc., etc. So the border becomes much more, starts to become a space of negotiation rather than just a line. So when I think about that, and this is just a very brief history of Tijuana, I mean, it's a very interesting part of the history of this region. But what if Prohibition had lasted longer? Or if the economic and cultural exchange it spurred had led to different forms of urban development and cultural hybridization? How might Tijuana's identity and the built environment have evolved differently? That is something that speculative design tries to do. That's why we look at these things with a kind of very different, let's say, lens, if you may, and maybe try to say, what would have happened? But unfortunately, Tijuana's allure faded with the lifting of Prohibition. And our young architect, Wayne McAllister, found new opportunities in the entertainment capital of Las Vegas. McAllister created some of Las Vegas' earliest casinos, including the Fremont, that you see there, and El Rancho, which was also called the Caliente of Nevada. And McAllister brought a piece of Tijuana's speculative fantasy to the American desert, a transposed scenery of the borderland spectacle. So it was McAllister that designed the first Vegas casino. And it's some of that money that was in Tijuana that left because, first of all, Prohibition was lifted, and the Mexican government, in a way, outlawed gambling. So that money went to Las Vegas, and our architect and designer of the famous casino, casino, also went to Las Vegas and helped sort of produce what we know now as city. So the art, Tijuana and the border sort of became that space of experimentation, if you may, which also covered a little bit of music, or a lot of music in a way. It allured, the allure of Tijuana also had a lot of significance with extending beyond the realm of architecture and urban spectacle into the world of, again, of music. This is, of course, I'm sure some of you recognize, this is Herb Albert's record, right? And Charles Mingus Tijuana. Herb Albert's connection to the city is a little bit symbolic more than literal, right? He used the quote unquote Tijuana in his band's name, and the music kind of served to evoke a sense of excitement, fun, and borderland, you know, being exotic. But Albert wasn't from Tijuana, you know, His band was not from Tijuana either. They were all, you know, just young Jewish kids from LA. So in a way, they were looking for they were getting in Tijuana bandwagon. So it was a symbolic sort of for them. Now for Mingus, it's Charles Mingus, who also used to live in LA. For Mingus, Tijuana represents the space of artistic freedom, an exploration where the usual boundaries of society and culture could be transcended. So Charles Mingus even said, you know, himself that, you know, this record, Tijuana, was one of his best records that he ever made. So Mingus did came to Tijuana. He inspired about what he saw and what he did, but he was also personally in a rough moment, and therefore all those emotions together in that place basically made him write this great record. A few years ago, his son, Eugene Mingus, passed away. He was living in Rosarito. So the legacy sort of kind of continued with his son down there. But I just wanted to show you that there are many other musicians that take Tijuana as a place of inspiration, or really as a place of inspiration or exploration. Now, I'm jumping really quickly because I only have 1 hour. But this cultural narrative of Tijuana continues to evolve, right? This exploration and inspiration. There was a group of young kids back in the 90s. They're all my friends, and we're all in our 50s now. The Norte Collective, what they were called. And they emerged as a unique blend of electronic music with traditional Mexican genres, particularly the norteño and the banda genre. So by merging traditional sounds with electronic music, Norte Collective created a kind of new sound and experience of the cultural narrative of the city. They celebrate Tijuana's unique position as a melting pot of influences, where the past and the future collide in exciting and unexpected ways. The Norte Collective work amplifies the speculative potential of Tijuana's cultural scene. They highlight the city's capacity for reinvention in a vibrant and dynamic hub in the global cultural landscape. So these guys not only mix the music styles, but they also created graphics that mix with contemporary graphic design by using, again, images of the city or images of the norteño groups, the traditional clothing of these bands, etc., etc. And they mix this together with the music, creating a kind of new identity for the young in the city of Tijuana. I'm going to show you a little bit. I'm going to hope you can hear a little bit of what they did and see a little bit of the graphics. So you could see in the images that they were taking iconography from not only the musical sort of the bands and the way they dressed, the way they presented themselves, but also from news, also from also narco culture as well. Because all these things were happening. This was the 90s, and all this things was really bubbling up in this part of town. So they were sort of not glorifying it, but saying this is part of the urban realm, and this is part of our lives, and this is how it's in a way represented, by these the young generation of the 90s. In the realm of urban planning and speculative futures, which is kind of where I am situated, Kevin Lynch's seminal work, Temporary Paradise, this document that I mentioned, stands out as a visionary exploration of the potential future of the San Diego Tijuana region. This was an amazing document that was printed in English and in Spanish back in 1974. And I should say this is one of the first documents that talks about cross-border planning. And it's a very important document because it also says that the future of San Diego needs to come together hand in hand with thinking of the future of the world. And we know that it's true because we see that if we don't take care of our water and our air together, right, and our geography and all of these ecological systems that we have, that we share, it could harm us all, right? So we share the same water. Tijuana gets the water from the Colorado River, right? That's another aspect. So we have a lot to share, and we need a lot of thinking. We need to go on thinking together, and this is sort of what Lynch was saying in 1974. This is a great quote by him saying, "Nevertheless, we think it is important to recognize that the environment of San Diego is a regional problem, a region which includes the country, the other local municipalities, and Tijuana. The problem must be tackled at that scale." And so that's what became a really important document. Lynch, these are images from the book, from the report. It's more a report than a book. The images were done by Donald Applejard, who's a landscape architect. His son, Bruce Applejard, is a professor at San Diego State University. He's a planner as well. But Donald Applejard was from Berkeley. So Lynch and Applejard approached the San Diego Tijuana region not merely as two separate entities, but as a binational metropolitan area with shared ecological, social, and economic futures. So Temporary Paradise speculated on the possibilities of the integrated urban landscape where planning and policy efforts to transcend national borders to address common challenges and opportunities. And the work, for me, has a speculative and somewhat utopian quality, imagining a future where San Diego Tijuana work together to create a temporary paradise, a place where human and ecological systems are in balance. So it does have this utopic, speculative sort of sound and feel to it. And that's why we decided to republish it, because I think it still offers a narrative that's relevant today. It envisions borders defined by collaboration and shared progress, providing a framework for addressing issues in contested regions. It also values cultural differences, crucial for building an inclusive future. And even though San Diego and Tijuana are not the same as they were in 1974, the foundational ideas of Temporary Paradise continue to inspire, I think, approaches to cross-border collaboration and cultural appreciation, at least in the planning circles in the universities where we study border issues and regional planning. So that was very important. But Tijuana then kind of took a turn in 1974, in the 1970s, and it transformed itself into a very different type of city, different type of town. By the 1970s, and kind of because of the Mexican government's Proyecto Nacional Fronterizo, or the National Border Project from Mexico City, marked a pivotal shift from an entertainment-focused economy, as we saw with the casinos and all these things, to a manufacturing hub a reshaping of the city's identity and urban landscape. So you can see here a little bit of what that landscape ended up looking like. Big manufacturing areas in the city, a lot of informal communities, especially of workers coming from other parts of the country to find work in the manufacturing areas, et cetera, and made the city grow very quickly. So this rapid industrialization of the north, and not only happened in Tijuana, it happened in Juarez and other parts of the northern border, attracted a large influx of workers, creating a pressing need for housing. As a result, informal growth became the primary means of accommodating the working class, but highlighting the limitations of the formal housing market at the time. So there weren't any large housing projects or housing programs at the time. And it wasn't until later that the government permitted private companies to build social housing. And that's what it looked like. You know, the evolution of housing policies from informal settlements to privatized social housing raised important questions about social equity and economic accessibility and about design. You know, how do you design for the working class? And this is the answer to squatting. This was the answer to informality that the state and federal government had. So you could see if you go to Tijuana and go to the east side of the city, you'll find hundreds of thousands and thousands of these houses, these communities that were built from the 1990s all the way to 2008, 2009. So very different drift and shift from what San Diego was doing urbanistically. So this then inspired or has inspired also, like Nordic did, artists, filmmakers, sculptors, etc., to look at this and speculate of what does it mean for the cultural identity, especially the young Tijuanense growing up. There's a short film. Well, it's not short. It's a documentary film. It's called El Hogar al Revés, or The House Upside Down, by Tijuana filmmaker Itzel Martinez. She focuses on the personal and communal struggles of families living in government housing, in those little houses that you saw. Documentary raises awareness of the housing crisis in Tijuana and encourages dialogue about potential solutions. For me, it's a work of speculative design in a way that this understanding can be used to involve a wide range of stakeholders, such as policymakers, architects, urban planners, the public, and have them all in conversations about the future of housing. It's a great documentary that follows the lives of these kids who their parents basically work in the manufacturing plants, and they work long hours. The plants never close, so they have 3 shifts. And so some of the parents work at night and come home and sleep and then go back to work. So these kids kind of grew up on their own, creating these social ties together and trying to basically help each other in the future. But they were living in small, government housing, ghettos, if you may. And that also, so a lot, when you see the documentary, you'll see that a lot of their personal life and a lot of their engagement is outside. It's never in the house because it's too small. It's too small for creativity. Now, today, besides those things that we're looking at that are much more internal in the relationship to housing, we're also looking at other accounts or spectacles, if you may, that have been very important. There are in the psyche of the Tijuana artist or Tijuana designer. The first image you see here captures artwork on the wall that just poses from the failed wall prototypes from the Trump administration. The mural features a dove and a hand, the world peace. with the word world peace. Contrast sharply with the austere and imposing prototypes. What if the border were envisioned not as a barrier, but as a bridge, fostering cultural exchange and cooperation? How am I designed? And so how it's my job thinking, how am I designed? Design interventions transform the border space into a place of dialogue and shared humanity. So these are things that are right there in our landscape, and we see them every day. What if we were designated welcome zones at borders that's designed to provide shelter, legal assistance, and integration programs for migrants? How might these spaces be designed to reflect the value of empathy and inclusivity? Why do we treat our products and materials differently? The bottom half of the image here highlights the relatively smooth passage of commercial goods and the underpaid, overworked labor force in manufacturing. The juxtaposition reveals a stark prioritization of economic interest over human dignity. So, products are very easy to cross, especially they come from the manufacturing process. And those are, things that we need here, right? Our big screen TVs, right? Our a lot of these things that we buy that are manufactured or assembled down there. Those are easy. And workers also pay a brutal price, and sometimes with their lives. During that pandemic, a lot of these companies did not shut down, and a lot of people passed away because of COVID-19, where women were in the manufacturing. So we had sort of this very kind of upside down world where we our products and goods and material things that we make across the border cross easier, faster. It takes about sometimes 5 hours to cross borders. And finally, you could say that colonial plans or modernist grids did not organize Tijuana. Tijuana probably was organized by what we call a NAFTA landscape. This is a picture of an Amazon distribution center towering over informal settlements in Tijuana. The stark contrast highlights the economic disparities of the impact of globalization on Tijuana local communities. But what if companies like Amazon were required to invest in community infrastructure and affordable housing as part of their operations? How could speculative design envision a more equitable urban landscape where technological advancement, and economic growth do not come to the expense of the most vulnerable populations? This picture became very famous, and it's still there. The Amazon distribution center is still there. But if you drive around, they took the Amazon name off of it. And it's true that a lot of the people living there were promised jobs that they never got. So I'm going to go a little bit quicker here, more than 10 minutes. Now, when I look at this history, this quick history of the city, and there's so many things to study. We can spend whole semester just studying the impact of NAFTA in Tijuana, right? But what I like to look at is I also like to look at other critical design disciplines, especially literature or art, or the art. But I'm also interested in science fiction. In science fiction, it comes from the border. In Mexico, most of the well-known science fiction writers are from the border. Because we have other genres of literature in Mexico that were much more popular than science fiction. Science fiction was almost like a B class, so literature. So we have two very famous books here, just to give an example. One is Narciso Genovese, that he wrote a book back in the 1960s or 70s, that he said, where he said that he had been in Mars. And this is a great story. And Narciso Genovese was an Italian immigrant, but he was a high school teacher in Japan. So And the other one is a great book by Gabriel Trujillo Munoz. These are science fiction stories, short stories from the border area. And the interesting about science fiction in Mexico is that it's not really highly scientific. Science fiction in Mexico is very political. It uses the idea of future to basically make it look the same. So studying these things for a publication, an article that I did, I did this graph, thinking about the future of the region as a utopia or dystopia, but also as an open or closed borders idea. And on these grids, there are a series of films that I thought were really good at representing where these situations could go. So, for instance, closed border utopias, Elysium, I don't know if you've seen that film. There was actually Elysium, if you look at the Earth cell that it was based on Tijuana, the director went to Tijuana and basically said, yeah, this is what dystopia looks like. He envisions technological advance, but segregated societies where access to resources and privileges is restricted. On the other side, open border utopia, maybe like something in Tomorrowland, imagines highly integrated and mixed societies that thrive on cultural exchange and innovation. Or closed border dystopias, like Sleep Dealer, which is not a very well-known science fiction movie, but it was shot in Tijuana as well, presents a bleak scenario where borders are heavily policed and people are exploited, often reflecting the contemporary issues of labor and migration. Or an open border dystopia, like Children of Men, where dystopia depicts chaotic or failed states in which open borders lead to unrest and social breakdown. So this is a way to use fiction or science fiction in a way, right, as a tool to explore the implications of current decisions and to visualize alternative futures. That's the word. This is, I'm going to skip this one. I'm just going to go up. This is Imaginaries. And harvest your crops for potential property. Robotics do your dirty work. So So, Sleep Dealer, I mean, the migrants stay on the south border, and they help to build things and do things in the United States by manipulating these robots, right? But now their bodies are, in a way, their bodies are digitized and still being used, but the physical bodies are across. So it's an interesting sort of portrayal of the continuation of this labor force that creates our things. So science fiction, simplified by these books, scenariographs, and films, plays a crucial role in speculative design by providing an active and conceptual foundation for imagining alternative futures. Cowboy Bebop, I don't know, it's an anime, very interesting. Japanese anime. They have an episode where these hitmen or these bounty hunters go to Tijuana. Tijuana is a satellite. It's an asteroid. I'm sorry, an asteroid that nobody can tame. Which is really interesting. So here I'm just going to show you some projects. What does all this theory, all this sort of ideas of thinking of the city as a way to come into speculative design? How does it work? When you're looking at a city that is it's a hybrid city, that, for instance, on the right you can see a house that is built by traditional construction system, but then you have a house, a prefabricated house that was probably bought in the United States and crossed over to Tijuana from San Diego, and then just popped up. Instant city, right? Just add water, And so that's how part of the city are growing, and then you have these kind of this is Tijuana's Statue of Liberty in a sense, right? Where an artist built this huge sort of body of a woman as his house. So he lives inside. So you have these, you continue to be in a very speculative place, right? That allows us to think about maybe new solutions for the future. And in a way, I do that with my students, where I make them realize when they work in cities like Tijuana, I said, we're not going to start over. We're not going to do the new thing that everybody's doing. We're going to work on top of the old city. And we're going to build and try to connect the old city and whatever the new city is going to be in the future. So we're gonna hybridize the same way this person did this house. We're gonna do a whole city in that way. We're gonna start to think about other alternatives rather than just again starting over as we usually do. In my work now with artificial intelligence, we've been trying also to think about what these places could look like very easily just by typing in some words, right? Trying to visualize what the future of these working class communities could look like. Very quickly. These are some images that I made a few months ago. Some are animated. They're eerie. Back in 2015, we did this exercise again of this hybridity of putting things on top of each other by reusing the canal that we have in Tijuana, similar to the one in LA, but it's the Tijuana River Canal, and basically putting solar panels on top of it and creating the biggest solar farm in the country, and allowing Tijuana to produce its own energy. And so this thinking of doing these things comes from the speculative process of looking at the city the way I've been trying it. So we did some calculations. We thought, yeah, we have the sun, that's for sure, right? We were also thinking of systems and how to clean the water. That's the runoff that ends up in our beaches here in San Diego. So we were thinking of using algae, and I was working with somebody in Scripps, trying to figure out a system where we can actually, the algae loves, these potassium and nitrogen and those things that smell. And so the algae would be able to pick that up, and then you can use the algae to do microplastics, to do plastics, bioplastics. So we were working on these, but how can you make this into space? How can you make it work for people? So it's not only an infrastructure, but it's also a social. So again, a little bit of science fiction, but I think that's interesting. We worked with Hyperloop. I don't know if you know Hyperloop. Hyperloop was 2013, crazy Elon Musk created a white paper saying you can have a transportation system that travels inside a tube, a vacuum tube. And there's a train that can travel at 800 miles an hour, as fast as a plane, in a way. So a couple of companies started to develop this system. One was Hyperloop One, and we got invited to a competition to design not the system, not the technical system, but where would we put this? And we said we need to put it in the Tijuana, San Diego, Ensenada, Los Angeles area, because it's one of the fastest growing economic regions in the world. And we won. We were one of the we won with other 11 routes, and they thought that they were very important routes. And in the future, those routes would be the ones that they tackled. This goes to San Diego, but it eventually would have crossed the border to Ensenada. So you could be in wine country in 18 minutes. You have your plane in 18 minutes. I'd say 18 minutes from LA. So that's sort of, this was our pitch. We presented this in Washington, D.C. This is what it looks like. This is the track that was developed by Hyperloop One in Nevada. So it is a working prototype. So the idea is, getting closer to it. Now, thinking of working with speculation, I thought, well, what would happen in the future if somebody in Mexico wanted to cross the border to go visit their grandma in LA, and they had to get on the Hyperloop? What if they didn't know what the Hyperloop was about? Technology usually is presented as something that for a certain economic class, right? If you look at a lot of the Hyperloop, let's say, videos and advertising that some of these companies do, it's for businessmen that want to travel to Dubai very fast. But what about a regular person? And we thought about this, and we made this comic, with a friend, Charles Lovitz from Quantum. And we created this story about this guy who goes to Dubai in the future to get to a Hyperloop because he wants to go and visit his grandma. But there's all this stress that he has because he doesn't know what this thing's about. He's never left a little town in Mexico, et cetera, et cetera. And then he has to go and buy some kind of Bitcoin in order to get a ticket, and these things are related to that. Anyway, so just to finish off, the last project that I did was for the Venice Biennale in Italy. And the Venice Biennale, I did a story called Border Astronaut, which is done with artificial intelligence. And it's a story of this guy who lives in the border, either San Diego or Tijuana, and has this recurring dream. But all was written with AI and myself, but also the images were done with AI. And also, but the video was then done by video artists from the Nortec Collective. So, because working it. This is, I'll finish.
Borders, in their essence, are not just geopolitical demarcations but temporal signifiers, embodying the chronopolitics of a region. The Tijuana-San Diego border stands as a paradigm of this duality, a space where historical sedimentation meets the anticipatory futures of technological surveillance. Migration, as a temporal act, intersects with the spatial permanence of the border, revealing the dialectics of movement and stasis. Today, AI reconfigures this border, not just as a physical barrier, but as a nexus of data, surveillance, and algorithmic governance. Latin American speculative narratives provide a counterpoint, interrogating the techno-utopian visions with tales rooted in cultural memory and post-colonial ambivalence. Therefore, the border emerges not just as a site of division, but as a space of potential, a terrain where new narratives, identities, and futures can be forged. In Border Astronaut, Latin American narratives confront techno-utopian ideals, revealing a realm where chronopolitics, time, technology, and territory intertwine. The AI-generated images in this piece once offered a rich, paradoxical dialogue between conceptual and fictional realms, a fleeting glimpse now endangered by the pursuit of clarity and precision in advancing AI visual technologies.
if you see that astronaut story, it's actually the story of the migrant. It's the story of the migrant trying to cross the border. See, and sometimes it crosses in groups, and some people are left behind because they cross the desert. It's kind of speculating a little bit of that reality, just kind of, but also inverting it in a way. Right? So I think as the architects, just to finish, and educators, we must look beyond the designing, just designing buildings, and delve into the potential of cinema, literature, science fiction, ethics, politics, and art. And by mixing, borrowing, and embracing these tools and ideas, we can craft not just things, but ideas and fictional worlds. And so making our reality even more valuable for that.